Welcome to July's OSN Showcase. We are so happy to have a representative from Western Governors University here to talk about their skills library and their continuing release of various parts of this RSD collection, as well as Edalex, representatives from Australia's Edalex talking about their openRSD project. We are going to be talking about skills and RSDs and the sort of global skills-based movement. And we are so excited to have you here with us as a part of this conversation. And we look forward to your questions. And please do put those questions into the chat, and we will be able to really discuss them at the end of today's presentation. So firstly, we'd like to take a moment here to express our appreciation for funding provided by Walmart that makes today's showcase possible. Now, today's agenda, we're going to just talk about a little bit about some welcome and some announcements, of course. And then we're going to dive into WGU's Skills Library and Collections release. And then we're going to talk to Edalex and their Open RSD project and what they've got cooking. And then again, we'll dive into the questions and answer session at the end. So firstly, please do follow OSN and join the open skills conversation. You can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and we encourage you to engage with us there and share your thoughts about what you find to be important and what you're working on in this open skills ecosystem. Now, of course, OSN is a community, and with that comes conversation and collaboration. And you can't have that if you don't have a place for those things to occur. And we have debuted a new community platform, and we want to invite you to become a part of it. You can meet other OSN members, work on projects together, find out what's happening in our various work groups, dive into discussion forums, and share your thoughts on our live feed. So please do. You will find this on the openskillsnetwork.org website. You'll see a button on the upper right-hand side that's log in. Become a member of OSN, log into this community platform, and dive into what we have going on. Now, lastly, you guys are the first to hear this, and we're so excited to share it. OSN is going to be having an Open Skills Summit in Washington, D.C. on May 22nd and 23rd of 2023. So we encourage you to put that on your calendar. We will have more information coming about speakers and opportunities to be a part of this fantastic summit. And we encourage you to be there with us in Washington, D.C. So for now, make sure you mark your calendars. And without further ado, let's meet our speakers. So first up, we have Melissa Clark, Senior Lead Skills Architect from Western Governors University. Next, we're going to be hearing from Melinda O'Halloran and Margot Griffin. Margot is the Head of Business Development at Edalex, and Melinda is the Project Manager and Business Analyst at Edalex. And we are so excited to have them here, coming straight to us from Australia, where it's very early in the morning. So thank you again, both of you, for being here today. Melissa, we are going to start with you.
All right, thanks, Christian. So, if you want to go forward, we've talked at past OSN showcases about the WGU Skills Library, but we were happy Christian's having us here today with the OSN to take a moment to revisit, discuss why we at Western Governors University are opening up the library, and to identify what we see in the power of the collections that we have just released. So the WGU Skills Library really is a massive data set about skills. It includes the skill performance, such as demonstrate nonverbal communication skills. And we take this skill performance or skill statement and we associate lots of other data points with it, like job roles and job codes that might be relevant, industry standards, academic standards, and other aspects that we combine into a data package that we call a rich skills descriptor, or RSD. And at WGU, our own library is made up of over 16,000 of these rich skills descriptors and their associated data points. And we organize these by collection. So we can organize these RSDs into like affinity groups like the 21st century skills or endurance skills or DE&I skills. Or we can organize RSDs into things that are more job or role specific, like software engineering skills or skills for respiratory therapists. So this is what we are sharing with our community as a contribution from WGU to help power the skills movement. If you are familiar with WGU, you know about our student obsession. So thinking first with our learners in mind, what we realized was that we wanted to get the kinds of skills information that would be most powerful for them to connect their talent with opportunity. And the best way to do this was to transition to a skills-based language. It took a lot of time, work, and effort to get where we are today. So as we put together our library and these collections, oops, if you want to go back, you're ahead of me a little bit. Thanks. Um, so as we put together these collections, we realized that the value of being able to share this information and work with others like yourselves who are focused on similar efforts so that we can all be a part of the skills ecosystem to use this data not only for our learners here at WGU, but to share it with other employers and higher ed institutions to leverage and benefit from these skills definitions as well. So this past February, we released our first set of 9 skills collections. Some collections in this release cover topics that might be considered more broad or open, such as social and emotional learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion, business ethics, and value-based care, to more specific collections that focus on job roles for medical assistants, information system security, curriculum and instruction, special education, and character education for teachers. And each of these collections were developed in collaboration with subject matter experts, third-party partnerships, and have been made available for public consumption and collaboration. So last month in June, we released 7 additional skills collections. These collections include foundational literacies, educational research, next generation teaching, digital marketing, respiratory therapists, medical records specialists, and foundations for data science and analytics. And the descriptions for the rich skills descriptors contained and the thinking about how these collections were grouped together can be found on our public site where all of these are accessible. So what does it mean, right, that these collections are released? So when we say that we've released a collection, what it means is that we've taken a portion of our skills library and we've actually published that data out to the open web using a tool that we call the Open Skills Management Tool, or OSMIT. And this allows us to be able to share it as well as to have public links that any organization can use as a public reference to point back to that specific RSD for their own use cases. And here I'm just highlighting when you visit those collections and you look at an individual RSD, there is a copy URL button there that you can click and embed that link for your use case. I'd like to call out specific attention to 2 other aspects of our public WGU Skills Library site. If you could advance, Christian. Um, as well as one is a resource and one is a request for your input. So first is the frequently asked questions resource. So don't worry, you don't need to recall all of the information that was presented here today. We do have an FAQ about the WGU Skills Library available for you and your partners as a resource at the bottom of our public site. Additionally, there is a blue button on this page. It says provide feedback on the skills library, and that links you to a survey. We encourage you, our partners, after reviewing a skills collection, to return to that public site and to provide your input about the rich skills descriptors that you viewed in that collection. Really, we're inviting you to be a part of helping us to make these collections better, more robust, and to help them grow. So we would love your feedback on how we might make this experience better for users who might not have a deep technical understanding of RSD, the metadata, or how to use the Open Skills Management tool. Basically, any feedback that you have about that collection is welcome. Since launching the collections and this feedback process in February, we have received minimal feedback, but we wanted to just highlight this and let you know that providing this feedback really is helping us to help the community. We think of these collections as a community library and resource, and receiving feedback is what will help it make all better by virtue of having more refined, relevant, rich skills descriptors available in the collections. So I want to just go over a little bit about what the survey is. So the survey is not scary. It just asks you to select very high level responses, questions about your role, like I'm a hiring manager or I work as an education provider. It asks which collection you would like to provide feedback on, and then asks you to rate that collection using a scale and stars. It asks whether you plan to use these skills in your organization, if there are any gaps you found, and then there's just open-ended feedback for anything that you would like to provide to us. So that's our survey. So you might be wondering, what is the future of the WGU Skills Library? So we just wanted to bring up, there will be many, many additional releases coming soon. Several of these will be organized by Bureau of Labor Statistics, or BLS, occupational profile codes. So please make sure to bookmark our public site and continue to come back for updates and new releases. We really look forward to receiving, reviewing, and determining actions to take from the feedback provided from the community on these collections that will enable iteration and refreshing of our public collections for the benefit of all of the users in this community. All right. So through releasing these skills collections, WGU is committed to contributing our skills data as a part of a larger effort, but we really are benefiting from it with our learners as an employer. So for WGU and institutions of higher learning, the organizational value and power that the rich skill descriptor adds is as a tag aligned to curriculum offered in higher ed. And then in higher ed, we can align skills to our credentials that we are issuing to learners so that we can truly understand the value that these things have for our learners in the labor market. Similarly, WGU as an employer and other employers leveraging these open libraries can do the same thing. The skills in these collections can be used to write better job descriptions and to tag and align these job descriptions to skills. So once we both start doing this in higher ed and in industry, we are together enabling easier, more accessible ways to crosswalk and compare where skills might be transferable across job roles for learners. These efforts start the forward movement toward a shared language, closing that skills translation gap, connecting talent to the opportunities that exist. This is essential because right now most of higher ed is speaking in the language of the credit unit and the degree. And employers, they do their best, right, to understand and interpret what these mean, but it doesn't do much for them in the end. So this becomes a much more powerful way to connect the digital talent pipeline, and it will enable machine readability. And what we mean by this is that the sharing of data between the learners' information systems and HRIS systems from employers. Skills is the common language for digitizing the talent pipeline and creating this common language in terms of the words that we are using, but also in terms of the data that is shared across the systems about learners. So when we use RSDs to enable and power the future, the learner can leverage the digital credentials received in higher ed. You want to advance for us? And that can be surfaced in an LER, a learner employment record, or in an achievement wallet to curate and create powerful presentations about the skills and credentials that they hold for either prospective or current employers. And the ability to do this is essential to the future of work in our skills ecosystem. So like in an achievement wallet solution, RSDs enable searchability and machine reading of the RSD so that the employer is able to learn more about the skills that their current or prospective employees have, thereby closing the skills translation gap between what is taught within higher ed or in educational opportunities versus the skills that are sought by the market, enabling them to make more efficient, equitable, and informed decisions about hiring, training, and development needs. So that's a little bit about the WGU Skills Library and where we're thinking and where we're headed in the future here. We've been thinking about this as an organization for quite some time, and it's really been through sharing our thoughts and collaborating with others who have similar goals that will enable us all to get further with this work. So that's why I'm really excited for us to hear more from one of our OSN collaborative partners at Edalex, as they'll be sharing with us the results of their collaborative project, what they've learned, and what they've done with these learnings to begin transforming skills practices. So I'll hand it off to them. Thank you.
And I'd like to take just a moment here to welcome again Margot Griffith and Melinda O'Halloran from Edalex, both of whom are joining us in an incredibly early part of their morning in Australia, as well as Margot fighting through some technical difficulties to be here with us today. And we want to express our appreciation to both of them. So thank you so much. And now we turn it over to Edalex to talk about what they've got cooking and their openRSD project. Thank you.
Well, I guess that's me. Good morning. Yes, I apologize for technical difficulties trying to come in. And as Christian said, it is super early in the morning. So I do have my trusty coffee. Hopefully that will get me through. I'm Margot Griffith and I'm the Head of Business Development for Edalex. And thank you so much for having us to really talk about our journey so far with openRSD and with RSDs in particular in the Australian context. And I will pass you over to Melinda to introduce herself as well, because we are a team event this morning.
Thanks, Margot. Yes, we are a team event as usual. My name is Melinda O'Halloran. I'm the project manager and business analyst at Edalex, and I'll be giving some colour to some of the things Margot talks about with regards to our RSD platform and what we've been doing.
Lovely. So if we could go through the slides. Thanks, Christian. So a little bit about Edalex. We are an Australian edtech company. We've been around for just over 6 years, and we have 3 products. OpenEquella, which is our more established product, and the one that does have some influence. So I'll tell you a bit about that product as well as the others. openEquella is a digital content repository. It was started a couple of decades ago, actually, in Tasmania. It was bought by Pearson for a while, and then 6.5 years ago turned open source. And so we manage and service and develop and even host on occasion that particular product globally. And it's an important product because it influenced our newest product, openRSD. Credentialate is, I guess, one of our newer products as well. It's been around for about 3 years. Think of Credentialate as a skills infrastructure between your curriculum and the recognition. And so we connect the skills dots for you in between your curriculum and recognition. And openRSD, which is the one we're going to concentrate on today and was informed by our collaborative projects earlier on in the year with OSN. So we're super excited to tell you about that. Thanks, Christian. Next slide. Just wanted to set the context of each of those products within a very oversimplified diagram that some of you may or may not have seen before. But this is kind of how we see the skills recognition continuum. And you can see there we have mapped our products to kind of where they fit within that continuum. I won't go on and belabor the point there because everyone on this call is acutely aware of that one. But just as a visual, openEquella and openRSD is sort of more around on the curriculum side of things. Credentialate, as I said, is that infrastructure connecting the curriculum to recognition. Next one, Christian. So our 2 collaborative projects, and we were extremely excited to actually be involved in both projects earlier on in the year. The first one was with our wonderful partners, the Education Design Lab and the University of Melbourne. Melinda's going to go into a bit more detail around the actual project itself and some of our initial, I guess, goals and what we actually ended up doing, which was way broader and way more complex, but it was super exciting. So what we wanted to do and what we started out doing was leveraging existing rich skill descriptor libraries from Education Design Labs. And working with our partner University of Melbourne to implement those within a system, which is our Credentialate system, for their Melbourne microsets. That was basically the project. The other one which we were involved with peripherally was with Dr. Mark Keogh, and he was looking at basically trialing a model for classifying and recording and mapping and even recognizing informal learning using RSDs. And he used Credentialate to do that as well. So next slide, thanks, Christian. And so out of that, openRSD was born, essentially. When we started thinking about and getting into RSDs more, and we, we were working through some of the little bumps, particularly when it came to OSMIT. And those little bumps were around being able to use international taxonomies within the context of RSDs, and we discovered that we actually couldn't change some of the fields. So we started thinking around what we could do, and that's when openEQUELLA came into play. We did realize that sitting in our toolset was an open source digital content repository whose sole job it was to manage complex metadata. And from that little light bulb moment, we were like, okay, well, maybe we can take the incredible work of OSMIT, also an open source platform, and see what we can do with that to create a platform that was a little bit more flexible and a little bit more, I guess, fit for purpose for the international context and our regional requirements. Again, I won't say much about that because Melinda is going to go on and take you on a bit of a deep dive with that. Yeah, thanks, Christian. Next one. This is just a quick flash up to say it's real, it's here. We launched in May, and you can see there already we've uploaded quite a number of skills libraries within there. I'm hoping that one actually reflects all of the Western Governors University release for their RSD libraries. We did that just recently. And just before I move on, can I just say, none of this would have been possible without the incredible support of Western Governors University and the OSN collaborative and network. It really, really has just been a fabulous thing to be involved with. So if any of you are on the call and are thinking about it, please do it. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. Thank you, Christian. Next slide. Just want to highlight that in our little journey around openRSDs and the launch, it became acutely obvious to us that we needed to create some resources to actually explain what they were, why they were important, and really in the Australian context, what it could mean for us. And so you're more than welcome to hop over to YouTube and to our website, and all of those, both the launch video and also the resources are all there freely available. And I do believe it's, we're incredibly flattered that some of those resources have made it onto the OSN community collaborative site as well. Thanks, Christian. Right, so I just want to really set the macro scene for Australia, and I'm very conscious of time, so I'll go through this quickly because we wanted to set the scene about the why of why we started down the road of openRSD. And then Melinda will get into the what we actually built. So the Australian opportunity for RSDs is actually immediate. It's hotting up. Skills are a very hot topic down here at the moment. But it's important for us because we have a 40-year rich history of skills already in Australia through our Australian Qualifications Training Framework. And that's our vocational training framework. It's set up through training packages. It's then broken down into units of competency. And in those units of competency, there are multiple elements that make up that competency. It's a skills treasure trove, but it's trapped in the vocational sector right now. And so one of the thoughts that we had was, what if we could unlock all of that skills data and actually make it useful and have utility, not just in the vocational sector, but also in higher education, K-12, right? Across the board, corporate. There's also been a lot of recent work from the National Skills Commission on the Australian Skills Classification System. Again, a huge body of work. at the moment, and this is absolutely not a criticism, but at the moment it's not useful in a machine readable way. We want also to unlock some of that data and make that useful across sectors. So there are two of the bodies of work that we're looking to see if we can translate that into RSDs. The other thing in Australia is there is a sector-wide call for reform, right? We have a wonderful system, decades old, but it really does need a reset. And I think that there is general understanding that that reset needs to happen. We also have, like globally, the skills gap. And there's hyper attention around that at the moment because of our recent change in government. To the point where at the beginning of September, we have a national job and skills summit that has been set by the new government. So everything in Australia is ripe for this skills conversation, and we are front and centre in that conversation. Thank you, Christian. The other macro challenges that are happening within Australia is we face the same that you do, right? You know, there is systemic inertia. That decade's worth of wonderful work is very hard to peel back. And in fact, you know, you don't need to be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We just need to look at what information that we do have and how we can actually tweak that for the digital future, frankly. The macro changes for us are also the change at the government level. We've had a shift of government, and so far that's been a positive thing. Skills-based hiring, is that a thing? It's not really in Australia, not yet. That conversation is not really happening. And so, of course, as you know, the ecosystem is going to depend upon, you know, both sides of the coin. Skills-based, you know, education, but also the skills-based hiring. And that conversation is still very, very nascent. We have access, diversity, and inclusion issues at a deep level, as I think globally everyone does. And we're looking to address that. One of the things that we have too, which is important for our economic development, is the skills migration program. And these things called the skilled occupation lists, which the National Skills Commission review very regularly. And so we feel that RSDs do have a huge part to play in defining skills, and particularly defining skills for migration, and then defining skills for our economy, which desperately depends upon that skilled migration policy. Thanks, Christian. I think I have spoken enough, and I may turn the mic over to Melinda to take you through the what. So over to you, Melinda.
Thanks, Margot, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So I've titled this slide RSDs in the real world, and it comes from a couple of things that Margot said, and that is, we did the wonderful collaborative project. We learned so much. And now what? So how do we apply our RSDs is really the question that we asked ourselves. When we commenced the Skills Collaborative, I personally had an idea about RSDs. They were a data structure of some type, but I didn't know much else. At the conclusion of the Skills Collaborative, the Edalex and University of Melbourne team, with the wisdom and help of EDL, so Education Design Lab, and WGU, who Margot's spoken about, we worked with their skills architects. And by the end of the collaborative, we'd learnt enough to create an RSD collection and build an RSD contribution and hosting platform, which was openRSD. So we learnt a lot through the process and the course of a very short few months. But during the course of our collaborative project work, we were obviously thinking, what next? How can we apply our learnings to real world scenarios? University of Melbourne, with their wonderful RSD collection that they were creating, were wondering how they might use those RSDs in the delivery of their Melbourne micro certs and possibly other academic courses. They have since progressed to aligning RSDs from both their own collection and other publicly available collections to the learning outcomes of 2 Melbourne micro certs, which is amazing work. And the RSD links appear on the learner evidence record issued with their microcert badge to the students who've completed and passed the course. So That's wonderful progress. But there was more for them. During the creation of their first RSD collection, the University of Melbourne team discovered that there were several incidental benefits of the RSD process, and this is what they're now advocating. Things such as crafting RSDs provided the opportunity to look at what skills are being developed and enhanced in their programs. Aligning RSDs to their programs provided greater contextualization to what is being learned in the course. Identifying the alignments for the RSD metadata provided an opportunity to connect programs with skills frameworks. And that's a really big one because that was something that hadn't been explored before. And we've got loads of skills frameworks in Australia. The process of making judgments on whether to align to an existing RSD from another library, such as WGU's Amazing Collections, or create a specific RSD, a bespoke RSD that you might need, really provided their learning designers and teachers with a deeper knowledge of skills metadata and skills alignment. So RSDs being full of metadata, when you deep dive into that and you start to craft that, you get a really good understanding of what makes up a skill. And of course, designing and implementing RSDs allowed the University of Melbourne to explore the scalability of skills uplift in their Melbourne microcert. So now they have a way forward as well. Publishing RSD alignment information on the learner evidence record, which I'll talk a little bit more about, was a big step forward. But Edalex, so our company, wanted to know if we could do a little bit deeper integration of RSDs into Credentialate. So Credentialate is one of our platforms, as Margot discussed, and it produces a learner evidence record, which details the skills that a learner has achieved. And we were putting RSD alignments, and still are putting RSD alignments onto our learner evidence record. But after some exploration, we thought, yeah, it is definitely possible for a deeper integration of RSDs into Credentialate. So we now have that on our roadmap, which is really cool. And it's something we'll explore later on. We also have clients who have Open Aquila institutions, and the openRSD platform being based on Open Aquila can be integrated with current Open Aquila clients instances. So institutions, basically what I'm saying here is institutions with Open Aquila can integrate with openRSD. They can look up and embed RSDs into their learning content that they've currently got in Open Aquila, and they can share RSDs between their platform and the openRSD repository. So that's something really cool we're looking at on our roadmap as well. The other really important question we pondered during the collaborative, and Margot has gone into this a little bit more, is how do we onboard other people into this ecosystem? So the institutions, the learners, the employers, how do we onboard them as to the value and usefulness of RSDs, because it's so new in our ecosystem here. And as we thought about this, we thought about, well, what do people want to know? And our eureka moment came when we pondered the big question that keeps surfacing in all our discussions around skills, and that is, what is the standard definition of a skill? People want to know what a skill is. It's a buzzword sometimes, and they're not sure exactly what it means. And as recently as this week, I've heard that question voiced by employers trying to understand micro-credentials presented on a resume or a learner evidence record. So through our collaborative work, we actually got the answer to that question, and now we talk about it all the time. And the answer really is that the RSDs provide the standard for defining a skill. They give a skill structure, context, and meaning, and provide the common language that people in the skills ecosystem are looking for. And without our understanding and our work in the collaborative, I don't think we could have been as succinct as that. Next slide, please, Christian. So RSD utility is a little bit more on the theme of how we use them in the real world. So for RSDs to be viable and a readily accepted tool in a job seeker's toolkit, we realized we had to help people understand why RSDs are important and why they should be investing significant time in creating these little skills data packages full of information and weaving them into skills design and credential delivery. So we're explaining the why of RSDs in our conversations, and the whys being RSDs provide a timely opportunity to introduce skills standardization in Australia across our education sectors and employment systems, who are crying out for a standard in skills definition. RSDs also provide value and meaning behind the skill name and statement. Otherwise, a skill might just be a word that could be open to interpretation. And we know that the data in RSDs is human readable, so it's easy to understand when you look at an RSD, what it contains and what it means. And also, of course, it's machine readable, so everybody can understand what the author intends to convey when they publish or issue a particular skill. We're also promoting the how. How do you adopt RSDs into your practices? And we're doing that by demonstrating the value of designing and embedding RSDs into learning outcomes through some of our recent use cases and research, providing free user guides, which Margot has spoken about, and I think the links are in the chat. So short videos, some materials on our website, just as much as we can do to explain how you could use RSDs, why they're useful. And then, of course, we're letting people get hands-on to experience RSDs through our openRSD platform. So they can log in for free, experience browsing, create their own RSDs. We support that. So we've also got support if people need some help with that. So it's easy to access. I hope it's fairly intuitive and people can get in there and get their hands dirty. Next slide, please. So that brings us to the openRSD project. Margot's already spoken a bit about that, so I won't labour the point too much here about what it is and how we got there. But I will say this, during the OSN Collaborative, one of the questions we asked and had to answer for ourselves was why we should build a new RSD platform, given that there was a fabulous built-for-purpose OSMET already available, obviously open access. So, you know, metaphorically speaking, we didn't want to find ourselves in Jurassic Park where we built it and then went, why? Did we really think about that? However, next slide, please, Christian. Creating the RSD repository for ourselves allowed us to explore a few things that we really wanted to dig into, and that was things like creating RSDs and collections aligned to Australian professional and educational frameworks. That had a lot to do with the taxonomies, so we wanted to be able to put customized taxonomies into our RSD fields, and I'll show you that when I give you a little bit of a demo in a moment. We wanted to explore RSD use cases for Australia and see how that might translate into some platform design for RSDs. Scaling of RSDs, permanence of the platform. So we were looking at things like an open platform, of course, that can scale up for worldwide use and can be used by our own clients and everybody else. Federated searching. So we also wanted to have a look at being able to federate with OSMET. And that's something we're still looking at doing. And giving existing Open Aquila clients, which I've mentioned before, the ability to integrate with openRSDs and pull RSDs into their curriculum content, which gave them a skills-focused content management ethos. And that's something we're working with our clients on at the moment. And of course, multi-tenancy. So one of the things that we wanted to be able to do was allow our openRSD clients to create their own RSD contribution wizards, which means they basically get bespoke RSD forms with bespoke RSD fields. And that doesn't mean that we're taking the RSD standard and just doing whatever we want. It would still obviously comply to the standard, but some clients might like an extra field to use for internal use to be able to filter on. So things like that. And so openRSD was born, and it had its official launch on the 26th of May. So I'll just pop you onto the next slide there, Christian, and continuing our little dinosaur theme. openRSDs are here. I'll screen share and give you a quick tour of openRSD. Christian, I'll just press the share button, and I'm now the presenter. Can you see my openRSD instance? No. Okay, let me have a look how to do that. I think you should be able to now. Yes, I'm sharing the right screen. Okay, good. So what I wanted to do is just a very quick tour. You can see I'm already logged into openRSD here. And if I search, you can see that we have heaps and heaps of rich skill descriptors in here now. And most of that is thanks to our clients and the WGU libraries, which they have allowed us to have access to and to pull into. I'll say it's the ones that WGU have actually published for worldwide use. So they've allowed us to pull these in and reference them in openRSD. The one thing I wanted to show you was the contribution form. You can see we have some bespoke contribution forms here already. I'll go to a standard one. The required fields for RSDs are all in here, the standard fields. What I wanted to show you that might be of interest is the metadata for occupations, categories, alignments, certifications. I won't go into all of them, but I will show you just quickly what I meant by bespoke taxonomies. So for example, in occupations, we give people, contributors, the choice of using ANZ-SCO classification occupations, ESCO, or ONET. So we have a few taxonomies behind this field to choose from. And if I go in and I have a look to select some terms, you can see the taxonomies appearing here. If none of those are suitable or you've got something else you'd like to use, manual entry opens the key for you to be able to put in whatever taxonomy references you like. And we've done that throughout. So certifications, we have the AQF, and categories, we have a couple of frameworks from around the world that you can use to look at categories. So that's kind of all I really wanted to show you, but it's one of the important things why we investigated doing our own openRSD platform, our own RSD platform. And that was so we could bring in taxonomies, customize things for Australian use and for any of our clients' use. So I'll stop screen sharing, but yes, you can check out openRSD. I'm sure there'll be a link in the chat. Okay, so looking at the time, I'll just quickly go through one of our other things. So next slide, please, Christian. Some of the micro challenges we had, Margot mentioned them, and it's things like access to skills data. So there's some wonderfully detailed and highly refined skills data locked away in government websites and downloadable PDF documents, which aren't really machine readable. So one of our challenges is to liberate this information, and we're going to start with the AQTF, so the Australian Qualifications and Training Framework, which we're working on right now, to see if we can pull that into an RSD format. Another challenge is how do we provide utility for learners, employers, and others in the skills ecosystem through the use of RSDs? For learners, it might look like integrating openRSD with badging agents. So we can push RSDs from openRSD to badging agents. And one of the challenges there is locating integration information for those badging agents. So we're currently looking at that. And for employers, it might look like generating job descriptions based on RSDs. And we've heard that from a couple of employers that they'd like to look into how to do that. Next slide, please, Christian. So our roadmap, as I mentioned, we're thinking around integrating openRSD and Credentialate. So we have a full integration experience between the two platforms. Converting the thousands of workplace skills and contextual information from the AQTF to RSD formats, so this data can be shared and associated directly to learning content and outcomes. And that would be really amazing if we could do that. And so we're definitely looking at that. And looking into the application of CTDL data standards across our RSDs in openRSD and potentially to our other credentialing resources. I will close off there because I know Christian would like to have some question time, but I'll leave it on the slide. This is the very busy Learn to Earn journey. And Margot, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about this.
I just thought that there should be a quiz on this particular diagram for all concerned. Yes, it's too busy. We just wanted to say that we've thought about the journey, and this was part of our mapping process and roadmap process. So thank you. Christian, if I could just have a couple more slides and then we'll stop talking. I wanted to just say, whilst we have been heavily involved in looking at how we can scale RSDs through our own technology for our local region, it's a bit more than that. And so, we are firmly in the belief of, skills having a common schema, a common language, and the benefit that we can see for our region. So we're not just involved in the tech, but we're also involved in the movement, if that makes sense. We had a wonderful skills meetup just this week in Melbourne, where we had government policy, senior education administrators, and those actually in the weeds of skills development, like Engineers Australia and other training organisations, actually in the room together to talk about skills. And we are hoping to continue those skills meetups, both at the state level, but also be involved at the national level. So I've mentioned that there is a National Jobs and Skills Summit coming up on the 1st of September. We won't be involved in that one because that's very high level political, but to have an associated event that leads off from the outcomes of that. We also have a number of innovative pilots at the industry level, both from a credentialing perspective and an accreditation perspective for organisations. So we are firmly involved in the movement. Next slide, please, Christian. I'm going to leave you with a particularly Australian slide. Those of you, or those Aussies in the audience today, will recognise where this meme is from. It's basically an iconic 90s movie called The Castle. And one of the scenes in talking about Indigenous land rights was around it's the vibe, right? It's just the vibe. And that is a very classic statement in Australia. The Castle in and of itself, that movie, is actually a masterclass in social commentary. Now, without meanness or judgment or anything else like that, The Castle speaks to, many of the issues that we actually still face, right? Social and economic mobility, Indigenous land rights, immigration, and much, much more. It's such a mirror on our social flaws. And the issue, not the issue, but, the observation could be made that we are still dealing with all of those, right? So everything that it was highlighting when it was made is actually still in existence. So leaving you with the very Australian comment of, it's a vibe, but actually it's a movement, and it's a global movement. And we at Edalex are really choosing to be part of that movement and the vibe around skills enablement at scale. So I thank you so much for listening, and we'll turn you back to Christian.
Thank you so very much. This has been an absolutely incredible conversation today, or at least a presentation, and we'd like to invite that conversation to happen now. I know I've seen a few questions pop up in the chat, and I'd like to turn it over now to my colleague, Christina Caldwell, who is our Open Skills Network Community Manager, to facilitate this Q&A.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you to all of our panelists. Just absolutely amazing information, and just it's wonderful to hear what WGU is doing and also what's happening in Australia. We do have a few questions. One question, and this is for WGU. Once an employer has created a skills library, how do they use the library?
So if an employer creates their own skills library, that's their own database of rich skills descriptors that they can then use to pool and tag and align skills to their job descriptions when they're sharing those job descriptions out publicly. They could also use them for internal training and development purposes for upskilling employers think there's many opportunities for employers to use and leverage a skills library that they will build and create.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think that you've already answered the question, what's the benefit of building a skills library? So thank you. Chris Coleman had a question. Is there any talk with HR tech companies like Workday to bring in OSN skills?
So I think that's like an OSN question, right?
Yeah, I guess that would be. So we have been speaking with Workday and more so on the WGU side with regard to skills. And so we don't have a response yet, but we can absolutely follow up with you, Chris, and let you know how that is progressing. But that's a great question. Thank you. And yes, we are at the beginning of talks with Workday. All right, then we had a question from Joshua Marks. Did you explore Open Salt for managing full RSDs frameworks? And then he also put a note. Open Salt is multi-tenant. It is also IMS case certified. And this is to all the panelists.
Yeah, and that question popped up specifically when Margot and Melinda, you guys were talking about the formation and sort of the background development of openRSD.
Thank you, Christian.
Okay, so as Margot was saying, we didn't look at other platforms because as we were talking about RSDs, we just naturally looked at openRSD, and the reason we did was because of the power and the capabilities of openRSD. And as Margot said, the metadata management capabilities of openRSD just stood out to us. So because we had a platform in-house, we hadn't actually explored other options. Margot, did you want to say anything more on that?
Yeah, mainly because, and it was because this came out of the collaborative projects really, and so we did turn to what we had in house. But I hear your point around the Open Salt and the IMS case standards. It's absolutely something that we are now exploring, right? I know it's kind of a reverse engineering issue, but we're cognizant of all of the IMS standards. We're cognizant of CTDL, and all of those are things that we are looking at in the immediate future. For us, it's a resourcing issue too, right? So we are wanting to do what's best for the community, absolutely. So I guess that's a long answer to saying, yes, we're cognizant of them, and we are looking to how we can be compliant into the future, most definitely. Our main, just before we go on, but what we really wanted to do in using openRSD was to get RSDs out to the Australian environment as quickly as we possibly could. And we thought that by using openRSD, which was a platform and a functionality that people were already used to, that lift might be a little bit easier. And so that's where we went to first, if that helps with the explanations.
Thank you, Margot. Our next question is from Jeffrey Guerin. What about multilingual for OSMIT and openRSD? We can start with OSMIT.
Yeah, so I think that's a great question and something that, we could certainly explore with interested partners. I think right now, getting it off the ground and with our current use cases, we were not considering that in the immediate, just getting started. But of course, that's always something that would come up and that we would want to do to continue for access and availability.
Great. And openRSD?
I see Dan has already jumped in there and answered that in the chat. So yes, RSD is fully internationalized and can be used in any language. And I should have mentioned before, that was one of the reasons we also looked at that as our RSD platform, because we were considering worldwide sharing and other languages.
Yeah, and just to add some color there, Open Equala is a global platform and we manage and service that globally. So it was one of the first thoughts that we had around that was the language issue. The other thing, and I'll preempt a question that is in the chat too around open source. Yeah, openRSD is open source. It's based on the OSMIT code, and it's also based on Open Equala, which is also open source. So yes to all questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melinda and Margot and Melissa. Since we're coming up on time, we have about 1.5 minutes left. We will follow up with the rest of the questions, and we will do that offline. We will turn it back over to Christian to wrap things up. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. And thank you, panelists.
And thank you again, panelists, so much for being here today and sharing all of the work that WGU is doing and Edalex. It's exciting stuff, and this really is an important conversation. The openness of open skills, as Margot was saying, the open source tools of Equala and OSMIT and openRSD are so important to being inclusive to everyone to truly be a part of this conversation and to participate fully and equally within it. And with that, we invite you to our next OSN Showcase, and that's going to be September 15th. We're going to be exploring our own skill development in vacationing for August, and we invite you all to do the same. So we look forward to seeing you in September, and thank you so much for being here today, and thank you, panelists, for sharing your expertise and your time with us. We greatly appreciate it. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.